Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this hybrid lecture that we are going to present this afternoon. This is the Senior Fellowship lecture being delivered by Professor Sridhar Rajeswaran, who is the first Senior Fellow of the Mumbai Münster Institute of Advanced Studies. And he is going to talk to us today on Through the Looking Glass and the Prismatic Lens, Earth 1947, a Backward Glance. Before I hand over the floor, the mic, the Zoom meeting to him, let me very briefly, because he has instructed me that he has to be introduced very briefly. So let us very briefly introduce him to you, although many of you do know him already. Sridhar Rajeswaran's creative and critical interests are in the area of poetry and drama. His doctoral thesis was on modernist poetry, with specific reference to the poetry of William Butler Yeats. As regards diaspora studies, his publications are in the area of diasporic Indian cinema, read with the backdrop of other literary works and theories. He has presented papers, delivered talks, taught at universities in India and abroad, and was DAAD, visiting professor in the universities of Münster, Cologne, Bonn, and Düsseldorf. He has read his poems and plays in various forums and was a poet in residence at the University of Düsseldorf. Sridhar Rajeswaran is, as I have said, currently the Senior Research Fellow with the MMIAS, which is the acronym for the Mumbai Münster Institute of Advanced Studies. So I give you Professor Sridhar Rajeswaran. Sridhar, please join us.
Thank you, Professor Nilüfer Bharucha, for this warm welcome. I, at the outset, would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. By name, Professor Nilüfer Bharucha and Kirti Whispered and Professor Stierstoffer, and the kind of help I have had with reference to my personal research. I thank the audience specifically, those online and offline, for taking time off and coming down here to see me. I only wish and I hope that you won't think it is a wasted hour or something when you go back. On that note, I would like to begin my lecture. Usually I have a PowerPoint presentation. Usually PowerPoint presentations are precise and to the point, but the organizers had turned around and told me that taking the vicissitudes of cyber, you must, and if you're not audible enough. So what we need to do is you should give a very, very clear and long-winded PP. So there are 2-3 instances where the text also comes down in the PP, though I was planning to read it separately. I think the real reason is the organizers felt that I couldn't pronounce words properly or I couldn't talk properly at times. So it does help few people if you had the PP as a consistent backdrop. On that note, is this the one which I should press? Yeah. And can I move away from here a little bit? I think I should be able to. Yeah. I'll send myself out. Oh, no. Though I was told that I could spend a lot more time I think as I am speaking to an audience which is very select and who are already informed, I need not possibly go through all the slides, so don't be betrayed by the number it shows. It's only for information. The title of my talk is Through the Looking Glass in the Prismatic Lens, Earth 1947, a Backward Glance. The schema of my talk would be defining the title, expatiating on the entitling, the abstract or a bird's eye view of the talk, introducing the author and the works, introducing the filmmaker and the narratives, cracking India through the looking glass, Earth 1947, a backward glance and the prismatic lens, the semiotics, symbols, keywords, and key concepts, the tale of a one single nation and two nation states. Conclusion. This doesn't boast of being anywhere closer to Stonehenge, but I thought an imperfect person should have 10 items. Okay. So this is more akin to something like that. Is it okay for me to go ahead? Defining the title. The title, Through the Looking Glass and the Prismatic Lens, Earth 1947, a Backward Glance. There are two parts to the title, with the action unifying both keywords and the concepts that underpin this talk. Part one of the title would be Through the Looking Glass and the Prismatic Lens. The keywords in the entitling then is looking glass, looking through the glass, lens and prisms, the prismatic structure of light and the spectrum of the eye and the lens, camera, other eyes, the editing console, and the projector. The word through is, of course, as pointed out above, organically linked. Sorry, there is some little bit of a problem on the screen. Yeah, wonderful. The word through is, of course, as pointed out above, organically linked to the backward glance. Defining the title continued, the second part of it, Earth 1947, a backward glance. Earth 1947 talks about a traumatic moment in historical time, also a spatial rupture, which would bring in both chronos, the trauma that stretches the instant, the moment, borrowing from the word instant eternity. And second thing is of topos, a cracking India and the line of partition. When I read through this, why was I calling it Earth and not merely India? One of the answers for that is when you talk topos and terrain, their meanings are lived in a geological strata. This is for the one. And second, Heidegger uses the word world in the context of civilization and its compunctions, whereas the earth is permanent and it gets attached more to the geography of something. After all, man comes, tills the soil, and lies beneath it. Now, expatiating the entitling, I've just defined it. Let's go deeper into this. This was actually the cover page. And I have this image of two eyes, and then you have a lens in front of it or a looking glass in front of it. This is, of course, from Through the Looking Glass. I think one of those fascinating texts, and especially a brilliant image when you keep talking about literature, essentially, because I would like to believe that art is a reflection of the social ethos of a particular period, and art and life are interlinked in that sense of the term. And right from time immemorial, and even going back to somebody like Shakespeare, we are looking at mirror unto nature, and this becomes binaries during the Romantic period, and it becomes something far more dialectical in Marxist literature at a later point in time. So the looking glass and looking through the glass as a reference to art and the aesthetic process of mirroring. The Alice here in today's talk is Bapsi Sudhwa. There are twin eyes. One belongs to her and the other to Lenny, a protagonist. Through is a keyword emphasizing looking through the passage of time, hence memory and relived memory, one a bearing witness and the other reliving trauma. In the highlighted text on the right side, which is from the original, if you compare it, we have Kitty. Kitty is Lenny's rag doll, which she shreds to pieces. And the looking glass here is also memory, reflecting now negative images, not beautiful things, the horror of it all. And that's why we have those slight highlights. And it is usually something which is very misty. And that is what I have sought to highlight. And this is to do with art and the word and the writer, Bapsi Sudhwa, and the work, The Ice Candy Man, also known as Cracking India. Now, expatiating the entirely part one on the prismatic lens, it's a look at the stories painted by light, unconcealed by the lens, refracted by the prism, the spectrums of colors created inform in myriad ways through their ever-shifting kaleidoscopic patterns of different wavelengths and bandwidths. I've used the word refracted here deliberately as it indicates a time loss which should account for the criticism that emanates from certain quarters as regards the diasporic distance walk. A backward glance through a periscope vision enabling insider-outsider positions in the context of memory, despite the fact of their depicted worlds having spun itself into all its contradictions due to civilizational compunctions. The point is, narratives based on memory and post-memory are distance and time relevant and not possible otherwise. And in the event of our obviating its worth and validity, there will be no testimonies of bearing witnesses other than in master narrative texts to bridge enslaved ancestors with liberated grandchildren. Walter Benjamin, of course. Now, part two of the title, Earth 1947, a backward glance. Earth 1947, a traumatic moment in historical time. Earth, a spatial rupture. The trauma that stretches the instant of the moment, a cracking India on the line of partition, of fissures and cracks, of fractured psyche and fragmented worlds, a moment in historical time with eternal ramifications. Freedom tainted by blood, two nation states. Radcliffe, you used his enormous knowledge of the spaces of India when he intuited as an act of grace from above, within 10 days, as we are told, even while suffering from a weak stomach. This was his touch with India when he drew that line. God help us, but he didn't. Over 1 million people died in 1947, 19.5 million dislocations. Will of Gandhi was also not anymore the national popular will, Antonio Gramsci borrowed from him, that had earlier sung in chorus. There were discordant voices and dissonance, which was the order of the day. The second part of it is a backward glance. This, of course, I don't want to try pronouncing the German terms because I don't want people laughing around. And there are some of them I found out who are listening to me from Europe, and I don't want them to laugh. So I will read that part of it. My wing is ready for flight. I would like to turn back. If I stayed timeless time, I would have little luck. It's actually Anna Arendt's translation of the thesis on the philosophy of history by Walter Benjamin. What is he talking about? He's talking about a clay painting named Angelus Novus that shows an angel looking as though he's about to move away from something he's fixedly contemplating. His eyes are staring, his mouth is open, his wings are spread. This is how the angel of history is pictured. His face is turned towards the past. Where most can perceive a chain of events, he sees one single catastrophe which keeps piling wreckage upon wreckage and hurls it in front of his feet. The angel would like to stay, awaken the dead, and make whole what has been smashed. But a storm is blowing from paradise. It has got caught in his wings with such violence that the angel can no longer close them. This storm irresistibly propels him into the future to which his back is turned while the pile of debris before him grows skyward. The storm is called progress. Here, the backward glance belongs to Deepa Mehta. A bird's eye view of my talk. But this is part of the abstract, which has been already explained, so I will just read it for you. Bapsi Sidhwa's bearing witness testimony to the horrific memory of a cracking India and Deepa Mehta's re-imaged landscape of memory of that traumatic moment in history is the focus of this talk. The backward glance, of course, belongs to Walter Benjamin's eyes staring, mouth open, wing arrested, Angelus Novus, impelled backwards into the future and is powerless to stem the wreckage, awaken the dead, or make whole what has been smashed. When the earth cracked and a free but fickle God never complained, what could a mere angel, a crippled, walled-in child of 9 do other than peer through the looking glass and live to tell the story, and which she does through words that in us each time and every time fresh images begets. Mehta, due to her own personal participation in the trauma of received memory, is likewise stunned by those floating images, images that are shade more than image, more image than a shade, haunted and horrified by the specters. She captures them through the prism of her lens in frozen frames, in moving languages, through voiceless scream and stilling silences. The quotes will get marked in the main talk, which I didn't feel was part of the abstract, which I had sent actually to the organizers to entice them to give me this golden opportunity to be present myself here today and make myself slightly useful. This is, of course, Bapsi Sidhwa. These are the details which you don't need. A wonderful person, and most important thing in this is a self-proclaimed identity, Punjabi, Parsi, Pakistani. The problem is, or the truth is, she would never have done this when she was writing the book, or slightly before she was 9 years old. These are the works and awards, which also you can go through. It was just necessary for me to put some of them. She has won the highest orders possible, because as this is being loaded, they may want to look at it at a later point in time. But this is only select and not updated. This is, of course, Deepa Mehta. And all the photograph or this photograph, other than the images which I myself created, or all from open access Google. You can download it, but either they are part of something larger where I had to cut and put it and paste it. Usually a computer geek might possibly take 20 seconds, but it takes me somewhere around 2 hours to do all those things. These are the number of awards which she has got. You could have a look at it. Again, this is select, not updated. At this point in time, I would like to say something. If you are going to look at the oeuvre of Deepa Mehta, you cannot do it just with one film. Because I think you need at least 6 of them. And all these 6 films are connected. It is besides the point that Earth is inspired writing from the book of Bapsi Sidhwa's Ice Candy Man, because there was also some kind of synergy between them, where she, after seeing the film Water, wrote a book called Water herself. But what happens is, I think, as an organic whole, there is nothing called, sorry, I don't want to use the term because she's also a very close friend of mine, and you can't just read earth, fire, and water together. It needs the other. It needs Bollywood and Hollywood. It needs heaven on earth. It needs what is cooking Stella. At least these 5 films you absolutely need, as well as Sam and Me, so that you would be in a position to talk about something larger. And it is no surprise that the same character who plays the role and talks about truth is the same actor who comes in all the 4 films. For instance, he comes in Bollywood, Hollywood, he comes in earth, he comes in fire, he comes in water. We are talking about Kulbhushan Karbanta, and everywhere he's talking about earth. Talking about truth. And the second most important thing is for anybody else to look at the color codes of these particular films. You've got blue and white in the context of water. You've got green and orange in the context of her earth, which are the predominant colors. And I think blue, white, orange, and green of absolute significance to me. And it stands there behind me. And there is also the whirlpool which comes around. I think you know what I'm talking about. These are the awards. Other than the awards, what is very interesting is she has got a lot of doctorates also, and also the part of the member of the Order of Ontario. So somebody who is quite achieved everything. And what is very interesting is each and every film of us seems to have won awards left, right, and center, and everywhere. Now, cracking India through the looking glass. Now, this is an old hackneyed phrase: a picture is worth 1,000 words. But axiomatically, even the other statement that a word is worth 1,000 images is true. So when we are talking about cracking India and through the looking glass, I felt it is time that we try to look at the text itself. This is what I was pointing about. This is one of those places where the text is long and the slides have the entire thing. If you like the drone of my voice, you could listen to me. And if you miss out something, you can look at it. I only wish one of the finest writers whom I've met who uses language as a metaphor, one of them is Bapsi Sidhwa. So in that sense of the term, my poor attempts, I thought, should be slightly more of an attempt which is not critical, but a different kind of writing. I don't know if I failed in it, but there it is for you. Shall I hear the lament of the nightingale, submissively lending my ear? Am I the rose to suffer its cry in silence year after year? The fire of verse gives me courage and bids me no more to be faint. With dust in my mouth, I'm abject. To God, I make my complaint. Sometimes you favor our rivals, then sometimes with us you're free. I'm sorry to say it so boldly. You are no less fickle than me. It is the beginning of the book. Iqbal's complaint to God foregrounds Bapsi Sidhwa's Ice Candy Man. veritably underscores the mood and sets the tone for what is arguably a fine, authentic representation of that particular moment in 1947 when the earth cracked, bore witness mutely, and the free but fickle God never complained. There was a human witness to the terror, a child, a crippled child at that, from a compressed world lined with rainwater gutters that lies beneath the jails and silent walls of the Salvation Army building, with dingy eyes on the one side and wide, clean, orderly streets that marked affluence on the other side. But these were in the fringes. I don't think things have changed even today. May last for some more time before it gets made into some kind of a multi-story building, as what happened to entire Parel and Lower Parel. This was a child who in her own life was walled in, mind blocked by the gloom emanating from those wire-meshed ventilations slits, her ear pressed to the wall. She is trained to listen to the silences of the dumb, her mind imagining the world of sadness that was their non-existence, non-life, or existence inside. Little was she to realize that the apocalyptic images which her mind always conjured in what may be termed a very fertile imagination in a precocious child will make our wildest nightmares come true, and like Hieronimo, make her want to bite and chew her later-day truth-infected tongue. To quote, "For 3 days, I stand in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my tongue. I hold the vile, truth-infected thing between my fingers and try to wrench it out. But slippery and slick as a fish, it slips from my fingers and mocks me with a sharp rapier tip, darting as poisonous as a snake. I punish it with rigorous scurryings from my prickling toothbrush until it's sour and bleeding. I'm so conscious of his unwelcome presence at all times that it swells uncomfortably in my mouth and gags and chokes me. I throw up constantly." Her ordered world's insular collapsed. Her coherent cosmos was disturbed. She had a cause to blame herself too, for she was also responsible for disturbing it. She spoke, and the words triggered untold mystery to her Aya, a surrogate mother. I use the word mystery because the mystery in the bestial floor, in that sense, okay, actually it is synonymous in this context with misery. In that awesome moment of a waking nightmare that unleashed bestial rage, she was gaze caught, hers a gaze blank, and the other pitiless as the desert sun. There was the third gaze in the palimpsest, the ayahs she had left behind, discarded not merely a gaze, but the very lens that makes sight possible. Her mouth slack and piteously gaping, her disheveled hair flying into her kidnappers' faces, staring at as if she wanted to leave behind a wide open and terrified eyes. Those images, that fresh images beget, need a catharsis, need the time for healing in a world gone mad and a world God had lost interest in, was indifferent to. For after all, how could he, God, complain when a country sought to get divided, its parts severed, wholes made partial in his dual names of Ram and Rahim, Ishwar and Allah? The child, alone on Mother Earth, was left soullessly traversing the time zones of an immediate, ephemeral past and a dialectic standstill present. with permanent Holocaust images. She and the earth were mutually witness to an experience which would forever stay frozen yet alive. She had become mute. She chose to become mute or spoke to herself in silences or in a language which only people who have been victims and powerless spectators can feel, i.e., the language of understanding pain. She was haunted by the fact that her uttering truth had made her complicitous with the victimizers. She had betrayed a dear one. She thus had an onus to redeem herself, heal herself too, and heal the earth of the wounds which she had in part created. Though earth on her side would never blame a child, though God too would never blame her for what she did, guilt alone was a new shadowy companion, casting shadows ahead even at noon, an image punctuated by the constant stern voice of irking admonishment, so unlike the ayah's voice that was at best an affectionate reprimand. This child, unlike her earth, was an indweller in it. She had lived walled in a compressed world, all right, but she had lived and should now continue to live also in that tight space, the space of gender, which she was responsible for marking, wounding. Thus, she had to sing. And when she did sing not alone of Aya and herself, but also of the violated earth on whose violated body was marked 1,000,000 deaths and many-fold its number in dispersals. She had to sing of the silently living, the dead, the living dead, all henceforth trying to cut time they were serving in the prisons of their violent, non-palatable memories, zombies shuffling across the unfamiliar topos that once meant home to them, ironically locked tight in compartments of trains where doors opened when they were instructed to be dumped in unfamiliar terrains, each a prisoner in a cell without a number, all along having to remember in the bundles clamped between a broken rib and a clamped, paralyzed hand. There was that memory of mutilated bodies and gunny sacks, which they too would have been. They were perhaps no different from them, barring the fact that the gunny sack had contained the dead, and the ones now cramped inside had lived through death would never henceforth live, or for that matter, live their new progeny. How will she sing? With dust in her mouth, she's abject. How will she sing with a mouth that has no moisture and no breath? How can Iqbal's nightingale henceforth lament? Even if she does, how can one hear the echoing cries of pain and hurt, ever expanding and contracting inside the hollow of the years? She's no ordinary nightingale anymore. She's Philomel. She's Shanta. Philomel, raped by Teru, her own ice candy man. She needs the miracle of a voice to sing her distress. She needs to sing of what is past or passing. She is the rose that rose no more, blood red in tooth and claw, willfully cut when it slept, when the whole world was sleeping. What is this freedom at midnight? What a tryst with destiny. How do you rouse the dead? She had to sing of that moment, of the many nameless, made to pass unnecessarily into the unknown because they believed in their God. Soul alive, maybe, no one knows, but now body dead and lifeless. There is no more life left for the tryst with destiny, and is too perhaps of no consequence, as body corporeally dead is transcendent of destiny, at least in the one and the only world as we know it, the cause and effect material world, for which reason people engage in freedom wars and try to impel the alien from their soil and fight amongst themselves in the different names they have affixed to one God. This book may be said to be in 3 parts. Part 1 describes an immediate world that's experiencing a lull before an impending new chaos. This event unfolds in the space of undivided India, which will soon impel the white alien colonizer, but while doing so, will also reverberate to the painful cries of division of territories between newborn nation states and the trauma of brutality and bestiality that was to follow this partition. Surprising in that the nation was swung into nonviolent resistance by a physically diminutive man armed with the tools of ahimsa and satyagraha, which were able to rock citadels that made the very sun set over its killing fields. Part two of the story, or the song of the Rose Nightingale, is of a changed world. The shift could actually be located in two very poignant citations. One where the narrator reverts back to her Iqbal. The times have changed. The world has changed. The European mystery is erased. This was also one of the reasons why I used the word mystery earlier, which announces that the colonizer is about to leave and India was on the threshold of a new beginning, equally important in the voice of Noor Jahan. I should try to read, after all, it is my country and my language too, but please don't laugh. मेरे बचपन की साथी मुझे भूल न जाना देखो देखो इनसे ना ज़मन इनसे ना ज़माना. Friends of her childhood, don't forget us. Thank you so much, computer. I think you didn't like my voice. Friends of our childhood, don't forget us. See that a changed world does not mock us. This marks the transformation. What is interesting is also the movement from Iqbal to popular music, marking a shift from the interiority of personal spaces to the larger, all-encompassing world. This world order changes and spaces reel under the weight of events. Part two of the story or the song of the Rose Nightingale. This is what I read. Please move. Part three, which the filmmaker skirts over, is Sidhwa's actual victory. One feels, this is my personal opinions, it did not for cinematic reasons alone, Deepa Mehta stays away from it. The calm after the event is not a given. It's a calm that has to be achieved, relentlessly pursued. It's a calm that continues to spin the world into newer contradictions. The jailhouse that had silent screams now has an echo in shelter homes, but thanks to an insidiously reveling patriarchy, if violent mobs had committed untold acts insane, the aftermath produced a far more infernal version of masculine lust. Women who had already lost everything, had fallen and then been rescued, were in reality only made available easily under one roof as resources for lust. Far more menacing were the acts of violence practiced now on the hapless body, which is curled, unadulterated, premeditated with absolute loss of humanity, bankrupt of any compassion. This was the world that the godmother at the helm sought to heal, and heal she does, as you will see in the Holocaust narrative, Schindler's List. Sidhwa also produces a balanced view. For every Shanta, there was an Amida. It is no accident that the eye of Shanta left behind is inured to the eye of Amida that stays constantly hurt and glossy. When the eye is wounded, even a scented breeze hurts. For every Hindu and Sikh house burned, there was a Muslim house that suffered the same fate. For every Mandi pimping poet, there was, after all, an Iqbal and a Noor Jahan. Plates were broken, dolls shredded to places, but both Lenny and Rana lived. There was crime, but there was punishment. Injustice already done cannot be undone, but cannot go questioned. And it was questioned, and culprits made to pay. There are so many powerful symbols in the text, and so many personal stories, including that of the narrator, all showing and telling what is to grow up in a purposeless world. There's something larger too which happens due to the courage of some women. They catch the world by its forelock, put it on the anvil, and beat it into shape. And what immortal symmetry. But alas, now. This is Earth 1947, a backward glance. Again, I had promised that I will skip through many of these particular slides. This is only for your information, and I can't prepare a PP without giving this extensive detail. Now, Earth 1947, I will just go with the plot, and I would be subjecting you to a little long passages only for the next few minutes. So bear with me. A plot and structure and storyline. This is only for people if they have not already seen the movie. This is a story of a nation, undivided colonial India, that's cartographed on the body of a woman. This is a common colonial trope because it comes, it has been used by many people. Isabel Allende uses it. There are so many other people use it. One of the people who uses it initially is the House of Cool in the context of Ireland, which is supposed to be the oldest colony of England, 1215 or something to that effect. There's a story of a nation, undivided colonial India, that is cartographed on the body of a woman. So actually there are two stories, one of a nation and one of a woman. The woman is also representative at one level of the nation, as the nation is feminine. Here also referred to spearbeam or ashling of the Irish, in the Irish context. The nation gets spliced into two. The woman too in a person is spliced into two and is representative of both Madonna and War, or the Devi and the Devadasi. There is a very interesting article. Sorry to, it's not eulogizing somebody or paying obeisance to somebody, where a third category was introduced, which was the category of the Dhain, which was done by the person who invited me, Professor Dr. Nilufer Barucha. If you have an access to that article, the third category is very useful. Instead of just Madonna and Hor or Devi and Devdasi, she has introduced a concept of the Dhain, which other people have also used. It's a new world. Suddenly, it is a story of two nations birthed in the backdrop of death, mayhem, arson, fire, and rape. It's a new world order broken into fragments by narrow domestic walls. What brilliant writing of Tagore, where the clear stream of reason, having lost his way, has his head no more held high, hangs slit at the throat, and where truth is in a tongue is an infection, and a holy man swears a lie on the holy book to save a girl from rape. A crippled child is the bearing witness. I'm using the word crippled deliberately because euphemistic phrases which dilute the impact of reality as it is a metaphor for the nation too. There is no world but a cracking earth represented by the visual line and the montage as the title is announced. Now we are in the realm of the film. The story begins with the neutral Parsi Zoroastrian house that's a trope for the colonial nation, undivided India. The household through domestic helps and through friends and relatives is considered to represent all the subjects who indwell in this nation state. All segments of the society, all stratum are represented, as are all religions, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Parsi, and Christian, including the representatives of the colonial masters, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers. A plate is broken and a map bears witness to the impending fragmentation of the nation. Actually, the first scene, including the entitling display, more or less completes the story in a nutshell. For the rest of the film is just detailing. The last scene, of course, is Alas, Sierra Alberto Morillo's two women, director Vittorio Di Sica, where even Madonna cannot prevent the rape during the war. One of the most pathetic scenes, both in text as well as the visual. But in the visual, strangely enough, the men who do this are different from the men who actually perpetrate the crime. Friends turn foes, and the reasons for the same is also embedded in Embittered Love, a classic interreligious Hindu-Muslim love story where the slighted lover initiates the rape of his beloved and the killing of his former friend or lover. There is carnage everywhere and all this in the presence of a child who sees the horror of it. All the elements of filmmaking are sorry, there was a knock on the door, and that was one of the reasons. Friends turn foes, and the reasons for the same is also embedded in Embittered Love, a classic interreligious Indo-Muslim love story, where the slighted lover initiates the rape of his beloved and the killing of his former friend or lover. There is carnage everywhere. All the elements of filmmaking are gloriously present. This is what is very fascinating. When we usually read a film, we hastily appropriate a Syed, a Baba, and so many of them because the forebears for images are entirely different. So you need to know what filmmaking actually is. I've got just 2 slides, which I would go through it fast. For those of you, if you're interested, look at it or take 30 nods or winks or something when I do that. It's okay. I was told I could have an hour more. Okay. All elements of filmmaking are gloriously present. Sound, music, lighting, editing, camera work that includes framing, movement, and dynamic time warping. This is one term which I have coined, dynamic time warping. So I don't know whether I'm right in doing it. So those of you who are planning to use that, be very careful, because if they're going to throw slippers at me, and if you use them, you might also get slippers thrown at you. The songs and sheer poetry of Iqbal and Bruna Laila, the world Sidhwa's text, are aptly captured in the work that is true to this sensibility. There is a world of symbols and their own purpose, which too we will engage with. So I would talk to you about few of the techniques and then show you the symbols which are available for you, which you could interpret it after you get it. Now, the only thing is, what is a cinematic experience? Shades and shadows, contours and contrast through lighting, color its use, its conspicuous absence through mise scenes, movement and stasis through frames with incredible pace and as frozen moments with freeze frames through dynamic time warping, symbols through montages, punctuated by sound and silence of musical note. As far as sound is concerned, if you have not seen it, you should see Psycho, the bathroom scene. Actually, Hitchcock's film failed. His teacher, who was his wife, as a few of us have been privileged to have, was somebody who turned around and said, go back to the editing table. He went back to the editing table. There are some 70, 80 odd cuts to that particular thing. Well, light is, of course, the medium, the lens, the camera eye, and the prism, the object that unfolds the many facets of the story through its different languages or aspects by virtue of the look. And this is not Syed's look, the look. This is only in simplistic sense, as each object of reference is a synecdoche, zeugma, synlepsis, is polysemous, and is multivalent functionally, engendering entire arrays of connotations and denotations, the signs and symbols in themselves. They also inform the other and the others of their selves, humanized here to include the persons behind them. It's an holistic effort, inclusive of light boys, set boys, makeup artists, production assistants, junior and senior artists, cameramen, editors, directors, and producers, just to name a few. I had a brief stint when I finished my bachelor's degree long ago. when I felt that I should learn something from these people. So I was given the job of an assistant hairstylist. Don't ever trust me to cut your hair because I used to work on wigs. So there was scope for mistake. Then I graduated to becoming assistant makeup artist, then light boy. End of the day, my people turned around and said, it's time for you to think and go back to the book. So after a year, I came back to do something else. But later on, the bug still catches you and you start taking documentary films and so many other things. But it's a different thing. Today, you find out the more you look at a film, you didn't know anything of what you ever looked at. Okay. Film. To labor a point, lens would refer to the entire range as normal, wide angle, and zoom, and would stand for the camera, the eye of the director, the cinematographer, an entire range of sound and silences, and most importantly, the sound of silence. Light, of course, is filtered, reflected, refracted, and registered through the prism of the necessities of the storylines by altering and capturing images with variable focal lengths and the grammar of framing the shots. Film may be said to have grammar in the sense that there are certain conventions of shooting and editing that are often followed to determine particular emotional responses or to create the illusion of continuous action in time and space. No language functions without grammar, and when multiple languages operate simultaneously without doing the Tower of Babel, it means it has perhaps more grammars that operate in tandem, in concordance, even where even ruptures are important as contrapuntal harmony. Contrapuntal harmony borrowed from Edward Said, of course, but this is my viewpoint. So you can take it with a pint of salt. This is just what I was saying. I said the film, this is what we call juxtaposition. If you look at the picture only on the left side, it's the same picture. On the right side, there are three different pictures. So if I align them differently, the first one depicts sadness, the second hunger, the third lust. Then mise-en-scene, I've given you a particular description of mise-en-scene. This is the montage of three shots. Fabulous work by Vertov for ideological reasons. It's the same picture of the same photo taken from different angles to show awakening militancy. Then this is from Battleship Potemkin. The angel is rising. This is to do with the 1917 Russian Revolution. This is the Odessa steps in which you have dynamic time warping. What is very important is to climb down the stairs. It takes only 1 minute. But in the movie, it goes for 8 minutes because stretching of time to highlight the catastrophe or impending catastrophe, the trauma which is in the face, the gaze and the eye. Look at the next picture. This is time, this thing, and this is the immortal director Sergei, Eisenstein's Odessa Steps, which many people have fictionalized in the sense that if you look at, for instance, different movies, Untouchable for one, you find the same scene, but this time in France. So many people, for instance, even that popular film with Anil Kapoor and has the scene from Gold Rush. Okay, Anil Kapoor with Nana Patekar, one of those classic. Welcome one as the same scene, which Kamala Hassan brings in Michael Madana Kamarajan in Tamil. So they've immortalized it. So Brian De Palma is playing actually Obeson in this particular thing. Now, how do you read Earth backward? You can read it as a Holocaust genre, where we are talking about the partition of India. And she herself has said the partition of India was our Holocaust. Schindler's List. But in Schindler's List, Schindler actually helps people somehow by omitting 1/3 of the book and closing this. The film does not cover this part of the book. It ends before this. I don't know why. Then you have memory narrators. There are memory narrators which try to resolve the unresolved historical trauma. Here is child's pre-memory narrative, but is doubly marginalized. The narrative, not just through a minority perspective, but also that of a child. Then you have the notion of rumors as history, which is the technique which she has used, other than the cinematic techniques to which were announced with the help of this. It's also the aesthetics of horror. Sorry. In this, you should look at how do you play with that cinematic narrative of Earth uses music, light, tight close-ups, and the element of the gothic which comes down in the film. Two scenes. One scene where Hassan watches people leaving Lahore, and the second is where the train comes back, and the train is actually becomes a transporter of death and destruction. The scene again is also reminiscent of Jews being herded onto transport trains. Please go away. And just this is the last bit of it. I might need 5 to 7 more minutes. The first sequence of the film for few of you, which brings in all this. How do you analyze the narrative? This part of it you can skip. The fractures and cracks and the bizarre black shadow lines made manifest as a collage, able of intimating violence and mayhem, runs up to 1 hour, 1 minute 40 seconds on the screen. The initial action begins. A map is colored, edges will be burnt, and Lenny breaks a plate. How can one break a country? Past and present and future ably constellate, cracking the silence of also the viewer if he was either feigning amnesia or suffering an aphasic self, cathartic and cleansing. Sudden and abrupt but effective. The story of partition is unraveled through the words of Shanta to the glib-feigned look of disbelief. And there is a band which is coming down on my computer, which I'm not able to help. The other characters of the story start at around 2 minutes 40 past, and the sequence ends with the rose being cut. You must understand, the rose is absolutely significant for many of us. This is the particular semiotic symbols and keywords, which have actually broken into 2 or 3 different things. In the sense, I think Professor Sachin Labde got lost. Sorry, Sachin. I can call you Sachin, right? Professor Sachin, and we had a long talk some couple of years back when I had done the complete thing on the Pameta, which was, I think, a couple of years back. And this is the how I have worked it out. One is the iconic feminine, and this contains the keywords, the key concepts. Just look at the last one. The color code is predominantly orange and green here. And the nation is represented by Gandhi, Jinnah, Nehru, Queen Victoria. Then you have the Hindu, Sikh, that kind of representation. Then you have love and art. Then there are strains. So if you are still interested after my boring talk, you can possibly look into it and decipher it yourself. This is the tale of a single nation. This is the map of India before partition. This is India. Left side is the nation that was. India and Pakistan have a shared history. It goes back to the Vedic times. The Indus Valley civilization is across both the countries. The multiple colonizations suffered at the same. Trade routes and the arrival of revealed religions and their inroads the same. Common agendas during colonial resistance, 1947 and thereafter, two nation states, despite common cultural music. Moorings, two nation states, despite common language and literatures, two nation states, despite habit and habitat being similar, two nation states, despite the shared cuisine, two nation states, despite shared poverty. Then, divided by political lines, same shared suspicion, three wars, territorial angst, human rights and terror, extraterritorial reasons. My conclusion, Sidhwa and Mehta, there are similarities and differences. Bapsi Sidhwa, I would look as a bearing witness. Deepa Mehta as repossessing history. Bapsi Sidhwa as memory, and Deepa Mehta has retold memory. Bapsi Sidhwa as re-memory, whereas Deepa Mehta's people had come down and it's a grandparent or somebody who told her when she was 2 years old as to the story of what happened to them. So it is post-memory. There in Bapsi Sidhwa, bearing witness both through herself and Leni, its actual and real landscape of memory. Whereas to here it is revisioned, remade landscape of memory. Terms I borrowed from, the terms are my own, but Landscape of Memory is one of those path-breaking books by Simon Sharma. Words that freeze, moving frame that stills. Last question, few fundamental. Can it be termed as a diaspora partition? Or should we call it just a dislocation? How is this diaspora different? How is it different from internal migrations? Arrival into new spaces as in different countries as opposed to forced refuge in new places in what was one's own country. Then the notion of the idea of truth. On that note, I thank all of you for patiently listening to me for 1 hour. I thought we began at 3:05 and I was given the allotted time of 1 hour to speak. And my job was easier because my job was easier because I was the one who was raving and ranting. Your job was difficult because you had to tolerate my impetuous ravings and rantings. On that note, thank you.
Stop sharing. Also recording.